Hey everybody, welcome into the Volquest podcast, volquest.com, and on the Volquest YouTube channel. I'm Eric Kane with Austin Price, Rob Lewis, and Brent Hubbs. Got plenty to get into here today. It was a busy day for Tennessee football in relations to the transfer portal. We'll start from the top at 1 o'clock, Austin Price. Tennessee got a wide receiver from the transfer portal, former Oregon Duck, Dante Thornton, a guy that Tennessee's been after for quite some time. He came in for an official visit over the weekend, left with good impressions, and Tennessee now has length and speed in the wide receiver room to add on to what's already there.
Yeah, speed's never had a bad day, right, Hubbard? And that's the big thing Josh Heupel looks for. And when they started, kind of looking at the receivers in the transfer portal, Ra Thomas, Dominic Lovett, two guys ended up at Georgia. The number one guy for Josh Heupel was always Dante Thornton. And Kelsey Pope went and saw Dante last month when they were out on the road. I had a nice in-home. Dante always, kind of felt a connection to Tennessee, loved the offense. As you heard him in my interview, on the site, like he watched the Orange Bowl eagerly to kind of started imagining and picturing what he would look like in Tennessee's offense. And, he got excited watching Joe Milton throw deep balls. So, Tennessee did a really nice job with Dante Thornton, and they get that one across the finish line.
Interesting, Austin. That's 3 years in a row, basically, 3 off seasons that Josh Heupel has brought in a transfer wide receiver. When you go back to Javonte Payton, Brew McCoy, and now here, what's the message to Chaz Nimrod, to Caleb Webb, and those guys in the room when you do this? Is there a message there, or is this just simply Tennessee felt like they needed a wide receiver and they went and got the best one, the one that they liked the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think that every year you take a quarterback, in recruiting. It almost feels like that's what it'll be for the transfer receivers for Coach Heupel. He likes, guys that can run, and Dante spoke to him with his ability to get vertical. And I think that's a big thing. The message to those players is just continue to work. I mean, everybody wants this instant gratification where, if they're not playing right away, they're ready to go to the portal. And you have to balance that. But in a certain way, let's say they play a little bit this fall, and then all of a sudden they become, if they are who you thought they were coming out of high school, then they become, those guys a year from now. Because Brew and Ramel will move on, and then who knows if Dante has a big year. I mean, he may look to move on because he'll be eligible to. So, that's kind of my line of thinking is you got to continue to, bring those players along. But I do think it's paramount, no matter what position you coach at Tennessee or any other school, you have to push and develop your guys to get on the field as quick as possible, because if you don't, they'll be looking to get in that portal really, really quick, which is why, if you're Rodney Garner, you're pushing Tyree Weathersby and Tyree West and David Hobbs and all those younger D linemen as much as you can. If you're BJ, you're pushing, those young linebackers as much as you can. That doesn't mean you can't work in and sprinkle in some veterans, but you've got to see what you have in those younger players, because sitting around waiting on, somebody to graduate, like let's say safety, you can end up losing, talented guys beneath them.
Rob, I think this is interesting because Dante Thornton can play. He's versatile. He can play inside in the slot. I think he screams outside receiver. He's every bit of 6'4", 200 pounds, long, lengthy, explosive. But you can line him up in some different spots. Coming back for Tennessee, obviously Squirrel White has performed well in the slots the last 2 games of the season. You have Brew on one side, you have Ramel Keaton on the other. This is a good problem to have if you got some too many cooks in the kitchen, if you will, because you have options. But with Tennessee primarily just playing 3 guys, I think it is kind of interesting. Ramel Keaton's not a superstar, but he stepped up for Tennessee in a big way this year.
Oh, every time Ramel Keaton gets an opportunity, he takes advantage of it. But that receiver room, it's like Lord of the Flies. I mean, it's he's going to play 3 guys, maybe 4, if top. So I mean, I think the message, like Hubbard was asking a minute ago, the message I think is that, man, it's survival of the fittest. I mean, if you don't deserve it and earn it, we're not gonna play you just so we can have a 6-man rotation. We've proven that in 2 years, and we've also proven that we can play 3 guys and play 3. Those 3 guys can play at a pretty high level. level. Hey, look, here's one guy that just won the Bolitnikoff Award doing it.
So Tennessee does get a wide receiver in the boat. It was, they targeted him for quite some time. He slow played things. I was here this past weekend. Tennessee solidified it with Dante Thornton, now a part of the wide receiver room. That was the 5th addition from the transfer portal. Now we move on to 4 o'clock Eastern time in the afternoon, and Tennessee added to the defensive side of the football, and defensive lineman Omar Norman Lott, who again was on campus this past weekend. Tennessee did a good job there. And Austin with Norman Lott, they're getting an experienced guy that's got about 44 tackles, 4 sacks, 7 TFLs in the last 2 years. A guy that's very familiar with Rodney Garner, and a guy that should help the interior, the 3-tech or the shade, for this Tennessee line moving forward.
Well, he's someone who's got an attitude that Rodney Garner gravitates towards. It's not about him. It's about the team. It's about the defensive line room. He talked openly about, Coach Garner's done a great job with that line, that defensive line room, and he's here to just add to it, and that's what Coach Garner wants to hear. Like, hey man, I may play you 55 snaps, I may play you 15 snaps, but I'm here to do whatever you need me to do. And he's just kind of got a certain attitude and like, a positive attitude that he carries himself with. I found myself sitting there talking to him, for 15 or 20 minutes after we, completed the interview, and he's talking about not even football stuff. He was talking about all kinds of stuff, and and it was very thought provoking. He's clearly a smart kid, and he really enjoyed Rodney Garner a year ago when he got in the portal, and there were things that Coach Garner told him then, even though he went back to Arizona State. When he got in this time, it was a natural vibe once Coach Garner said, "Hey man, I'm still here." And he talked about, Coach Garner is a man of his word. He told me he, would, treat me a certain way. He's always treated me that way. And, I think Tennessee's getting someone who's got a high motor. And again, someone who can, be a nice addition to the defensive line.
Brent, I think this is a guy too that I feel like it's been Tennessee for a long time, right? I mean, you don't hear many chatter about other programs kind of really in this. Now, I'm sure there were, but the relationship with Rodney Garner from last year at this point in time continued on this year at this point in time. He's a guy, when I talked to him on Sunday, super excited to be at Tennessee, saying this is, when I came on my visit over the weekend, first time I've been here to the East. There's a massive facility. The coaching staff, they speak truthness into you. Seemed like a guy that's really excited, and a guy that's got multiple years as well, because there are some veterans in that defensive line room to where Omar Norman Lott can be here for at least 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a ton of sense. And again, that one was a little easier for Tennessee because they had the prior relationship, because he was in the portal last year and visited with Tennessee. Think about this, guys. I mean, he went through a lot at Arizona State, right? So he's looking for what? Stability. He's looking for some honesty. He's looking for some direction and a clear culture that and an identity of what you're going to be. Nobody knows what you really are at Arizona State, okay, because of everything that they've been through. So I think the stability factor at Tennessee, and the fact that Rodney Garner's message this year, as Austin said, was the same message as it was a year ago, probably resonates with a kid who's heard a lot of different messages the last couple of years at Arizona State, which has prompted him to look around.
So Tennessee gets 2 of those, Rob Lewis, a wide receiver, and a defensive lineman. And then at 7 o'clock last night, Tennessee added a 3rd from the transfer portal, and an offensive tackle, John Campbell, formerly of Miami. Tennessee won out over Florida and Florida State in this sweepstakes. Had him on campus earlier in the weekend, kind of started off his weekend where he ended at Florida. But Rob, Tennessee needed another tackle body at the minimum, and Tennessee got a guy that they kind of channeled in on early on in the process, in John Campbell.
Yeah, and AP's been talking about the need for tackle bodies for forever, and what you're looking for in the portal, and so nabbing a guy from a Power 5 program like that's played, I think is big. And to Hubbard's point from a minute ago, how ironic is it that just 2 years into Heupel's tenure, after everything we've all seen for a decade, when kids are looking for stability, Tennessee kind of stands out. That's sort of a strength of this program, when it had been the exact opposite of that for so long. But I think you're right. When you have kids that have been through it in college, where the coaching changes, position changes, not being treated right, and then Tennessee kind of stands out for being what you're looking for in that regard. I think that says a lot about what Josh Heupel has been able to do with what was a really, not a great situation when he got here.
Also, tell us a little bit more about John Campbell. He's a guy that's been in college for quite some time. This would actually 2023 would technically be his 6th year in college. It's a guy that's played an awful lot, played as a redshirt freshman and sophomore, missed the 2021 season with injury, started at left tackle this past year for Miami. What is Tennessee getting in offensive tackle John Campbell?
Well, just some experience, it's hard to replicate, what Darnell Wright gave you. So I'm not going to sit here and say that, he's going to just be like, oh, just plug him in. He's going to look the same. That I don't believe that. But again, he brings experience. Yeah, the staff obviously, coveted another tackle. They signed Larry Johnson, back in December, JUCO kid, but they needed another tackle, and that this was one that, once he went in the portal because his connection with Joe Milton, and his connection with, one of Hype's former players, it just made some sense to, for him to come take a look, and that's kind of the crux of this trending the way it trended late. So again, Tennessee needed another tackle, and they get that other tackle.
Yeah, and again, I think it's a situation where Tennessee targeted him, Austin, much like they did at the receiver position. They put all their eggs in this basket. They passed on the kid from Rhode Island, and kind of said we're sort of pushing all of our chips into the middle of the table for this, and this is what we want. And Tennessee was fortunate enough, despite a tough recruiting visit from a travel standpoint, to be able to get this one across the finish line. Risk reward for Tennessee. They took the chance, kind of bypassed it on some other guys, even though they had to have a tackle body, and it ended up with the guy that they wanted the most.
So Tennessee now with 7 players from the transfer portal, making it 3 for 3 on Monday afternoon with Omar Norman-Lott, Dante Thornton, and John Campbell. Now you look at, let's dial back a little bit, Eric Berry. It was announced on Monday afternoon that he is going to be inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame, becoming, what is it, Brent Hubbs, the 22nd member of the Tennessee family?
Yeah, I think that's 22nd member to go into the College Football Hall of Fame, and a most deserving honor for Eric Berry. One of my all-time favorites. Rob, I think back to the phone call you gave me when he was at the Nike camp as a high school kid, who was, in high school at Creekside. He played, quarterback. He played defensive back. And I remember you called, said, hey, I'm logging this story on Eric Berry. We knew who Eric Berry was, but Rob, I don't think anybody knew what exactly Eric Berry was until that day. Was that not a cast on his hand?
He had broken his hand, like in the long jump pit. Bryson broke his hand or his wrist, whatever. I mean, he had on a cast. I mean, it wasn't a brace; it was a cast. There was actual plaster there. I mean, it wasn't a club like somebody would play with, but he had an actual brace on his hand and was just showing up. This is back when the Rivals and Nike partnered to do these camps, and it was on Georgia's campus. And Eric was just, I think, going to show up and take some pictures and maybe for Rivals purposes do a couple of interviews and there were probably some Nike All-American people there that wanted to interview him, and at that time that would have been a big springboard into the U.S. Army All-American game. Long story short, kids are running 40s, they're electronically timed, and Eric, there's a lot of people there. There's a lot of top players from the South. And
did he Willie Mays Hayes that thing, Rob?
He Willie Mays Hayes. He's wearing a backpack. He's walking around just talking to people, and then all of a sudden I see him take the backpack off, and I don't think he really even stretched that much, and got down with his cast on and ripped off. I think it was a 4.33 Hubber, if I remember right, and it was a jaw dropper. I mean, there were some dudes there that that day. Remember Andre Smith that played for Alabama, played in the NFL forever. Harrison Smith was there, so a couple of pretty good NFL safeties right in line together to run that 40. But that was a mic drop when EB popped his backpack off and got down there with his plaster cast and popped off a sub 4.4.
There's been some good Tennessee football players over the years, don't get me wrong. There's been some good Tennessee football players since Eric Berry, but you look at his career line while at Tennessee in 3 years, 245 tackles, 17 and a half TFLs, 3 sacks, 14 interceptions, 3 of which were returned all the way for pick sixes. He had 494 interception return yards, 4 fumble recoveries, 2 forced fumbles. He was a freshman All-American. He was a unanimous All-American later in his career. He was the 5th overall draft pick. Austin Price. You remember him, covering him in recruiting. He turned out to be a stud for Tennessee, and a guy that I don't think Tennessee's had on campus since, to be completely honest.
Well, let's add to the stat line. He got Austin Price hired at Volquest.com.
I was setting him up to tell the story.
Let's put that in the career stat line too, right, AP?
The origins of Uncle AP started in Fairburn, Georgia.
You were more like first cousin AP, older first cousin AP back then.
So, you know, and before I tell my story, I mean, like when you read all that stat, I mean, like his last year, man, I mean, Monty had him up there playing the pseudo linebacker. I mean, like
Monty had him
playing back there playing in the secondary as much as he was those first 2 years under John Chavis. But yeah, I mean, this was back when I was writing recruiting articles for the Daily Times and John Bryce, and I was doing a video segment for the News Sentinel called "The Price Is Right," which was just this little BS, you know, video segment where I gave my score prediction.
Please tell me you had the theme music.
No. And it was just silly. It was just a silly little nonsense, you know, that I did each week. And so, but I was doing a little bit of grassroots recruiting. That's back when I got in the whitepages.com. See, I didn't have the Rivals at the time database or an On3 database. Now, you know, I got on whitepages.com, grassroots recruiting. Matt Ray will be able to understand this because this is how Matt started. I looked on whitepages.com. I called all 17 Stevens in Flower Mound, Texas before I finally got to Nick Stevens. You know, so like back then, like I just had to go see kids. So like I went and saw Eric Berry and got to the school. It was me, Fred White, Dave Hooker at the time. And I was going down there to do a video piece for the Locker Room, our Sunday night show here in Knoxville. And I get down there, and it's right before they're leaving to go, you know, to they're playing Marist, Garrison Hurst High School. And you know, we get there, and I've got all these lights and stuff set up because I've got all the TV equipment. Well, Dave Hooker's like, just throws his recorder in there. He does his interview for News Sentinel, and he goes on to the hotel. Well, I can't do that, so I've got to ride. I ride the team bus to Marist with Creekside, and I get there. I meet James Berry. James blown away that someone from Knoxville would come watch Eric play. Hit it off with him. I end up riding back to Creekside after the game with Evan, Elliott, Carol, and James, the whole Berry family in the Berry minivan. And I get back there. I do the interview with James, with Eric, and when I go to leave, James is like, "Hey man, when he decides what he's going to do, I'll let you know." And I'm thinking, "Yeah, I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will." Like, you know what I mean? And December 10th, I'm almost positive that's the date. You can look it up to see what date he actually committed on, but I think it was December 10th. You know, he called me. It was like a little after 12. And he's like, "Hey, Eric just called and committed to Coach Fulmer." And I said, "No kidding." And I said, "Does anybody else know?" And he goes, "No." And I did the interview with Eric, and we got it published at the Daily Times on the Daily Times website. I don't even know what that is. Is it dailytimes.net or dailytimes.com, whatever it is. You know, and you know, little old Austin beat Brent Hubbs, the guru. And you know, the News Sentinel got mad. They're like, "Well, that's not fair. Like, you can't be doing that." What do you mean I can't be doing that? So they told me at the time, "Hey, you got to choose the little BS video segment thing that I did for them, or writing recruiting articles for the Daily Times." Well, I didn't think that was fair because they weren't willing to let me write recruiting articles for them. So I chose the Daily Times. And then, you know, Brent called me a week or two later, and the rest is history. The rest is history. So, you know, that's the indoctrination of Austin to Volquest.
Brent, how many times since then have you regretted that?
How many times you going, "Damn you, James Berry"?
Now, here's where I would.
The answer is never, because we just keep kicking everybody's ass.
Here's where I went with this with the deal is, I called Eric on that Sunday because there was rumors it was starting to leak out that he was committing, that something was going to happen sooner rather than later. And I called Eric, and Eric gave me the same song and dance that he hadn't made it. He hadn't made a final decision, but he was getting close, but he wasn't sure when he was going to do something. And so I checked the box on that Sunday. Okay, I've got my update on him, and then lo and behold, you know, couple hours later, you know, there's a post on the message board that Eric Berry's committed via the Daily Times, and I was like, not a happy camper, and quickly set up a lunch at Calhoun's on Kingston Pike with Austin Price and said, all right, let's figure out how to work this thing out. And the rest is kind of history there on his recruitment. My favorite Eric Berry story for me outside of football is I used to park down where the coach's parking lot is, down next to the substation. That's where I used to park down there because I didn't have an H tag. So I would leave the old Sports Information in Stokely, and I would cut through the football complex, and you could go down the back steps back before they expanded the complex, and I could go to my car that way. I only got my windshield knocked out one time down there, by the way. So that was how I would go home. And so I was leaving one evening in September, and I'm walking through, and it's on a Thursday because back then Coach Fulmer talked every day after practice. And so I was leaving, and I walked through, and all the managers are doing helmet scrub in the complex. And I'd known those managers, gotten to know those guys. So I was, hey, man, what's going on? Da-da-da-da-da-da. We're standing there, and I look around, and there's Eric Berry, and he's sitting on a chair with the rest of the managers, and he's stickering helmets. And I said, what are you doing? And he was like, I just like hanging out with these guys. That's what I do. It took me 2 months to convince him that I could write a story about it and to get him to give me a quote about it because he didn't want anybody to know. Because it wasn't, I mean, he would bring him pizzas, he would do different things, but it was his thing. He didn't want anybody to know that he was there. He wasn't doing it for show. He wasn't doing it for any cameras or anything like that. He was just hanging out with guys that he knew and that he was buddies with. And it was one of the coolest things that I've seen. I don't know, Rob, that more guys had fun just playing the college game the way Eric Berry did. He just had, he had fun. It was a game. He was trying to win. He was competitive as hell and all those things. But the guy's pure joy for playing the game of football is something that always resonated with me, which is cool.
That was cool. He's the best several things, but he's the best freshman I've ever seen come through here in any sport, like ready to play immediately and not ready to play because you had to play, like this guy got hurt in fall camp. What are we going to do?
Gerard Parrish
here? He showed up and he was a dude. He was physically ready to play. And that SEC championship game against LSU, both he and Gerard Mayo, those are as good. That's as good of a game performance as I've seen two guys have in over 20 years. They were big time that night. And Eric had a lot of nights like that, but he was for him to do that as a freshman, just sick.
Well, congratulations to Eric Berry on the College Football Hall of Fame nod. I think it was a no-brainer. And now the 22nd Tennessee Volunteer to be in the College Football Hall of Fame. Had a fantastic NFL career, faced some adversities, but always bounced back from those adversities. Again, when I was, middle school, high school, Eric Berry was, making plays for Tennessee. So that's some good childhood memories for me while you guys were out here working the beat and writing stories and all that good stuff. Tennessee basketball has been playing some good basketball here lately, especially on the offensive end. We talked about on the Rocky Top Rewind Sunday night, Rob Lewis, but it's number one defense in the nation, of course, but thanks to Olivier Cumwa and Jonas Adu, a career-high 15 points, and Santiago Vespi continuing to shoot the ball well. Tennessee beat South Carolina and Mississippi State by combined 77 points last week, squaring up for two big-time rivalry games against Vanderbilt and Kentucky this week inside Thompson-Boling Arena.
Yeah, I try not to get too carried away. I try to, settle down. Mississippi State's not that good. South Carolina is definitely not that good. But still, I just don't think you can discount, how well Tennessee played on both ends of the floor in both those games. I think Mississippi State was probably their most complete game of the year when you talk about offense, defense, taking care of the basketball, executing a game plan. And then they go on the road. And again, South Carolina is not very good, but crazy stuff happens all the time on the road in college basketball. Bad teams beat good teams show up not ready to play. Bad teams play out of their minds and get hot shooting one night. Tennessee just took South Carolina apart in every phase of the game. Defense, South Carolina shot 25% for the game. Tennessee doubled them up on the glass. Tennessee shot over 50%. It was just two really strong performances, and I don't care what the level of competition was. Tennessee's executing at a really high level right now, up to number 5 in the polls on Monday. I definitely think they're a top 5 team, and I definitely don't think it's a coincidence. They just played 2 great games when they got Josiah James back after a month.
Rob, big picture here a little bit with the league. Obviously, Tennessee's not played the best teams in the league. What is your 10,000-foot view of the league right now, and kind of where Tennessee factors into the upper part of this league through 2 weeks of conference play?
I mean, again, small sample size, and like you say, Hubbard, we've not seen Tennessee against great competition, but I think it's Tennessee and Alabama, and unless Arkansas proves otherwise, it's Tennessee and Alabama and everybody else. And I mean, not everybody else. I think there's still some good teams, and I think Tennessee and Alabama look really good, like compete for a Final Four good. Now Arkansas might get there. They've got the talent, but I think they're a step below yet. Auburn, to me, is certainly an NCAA team. I think they're a step below both Alabama and Tennessee. Kentucky looks just good. I mean, it's a mess up there. I mean, Mississippi State, they might.
What do you make of Missouri?
That's the one, Hubbard, that I'm not sure. I'm not pushing all my chips into the middle of the table on Missouri. I mean, the Kentucky win, that's a great win for Missouri, but that's not a typical Kentucky team. I don't think they struggled a little bit with Vanderbilt at home over the weekend in the game. You thought they should have been a pretty solid favorite in. So I'm not buying Missouri stock just yet, but I'm curious. They've got my attention for sure.
It just certainly feels like, through, again, 3 conference games, small sample size, what we've all known all along. Tennessee's defense is going to travel, and if their offense travels with it, they're going to be really near impossible to beat. But when their offense doesn't travel, then things get way more hairy. But like when they shoot the ball the way they've shot it the last 2 games, I mean, I know he's not shot 50 shots, right? But when you say Olivier Kamwa hasn't missed a shot in 2023, I mean, like, that seems so silly to me. But like, it's the truth.
But it's not like he's taking 3 shots either. He's 15
Correct.
for 15.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
15 of 15, 31 points and 11 boards his last 2 games. 10 of those boards came against South Carolina, and that's where Rick Barnes.
They're not all bunnies.
Yeah,
they aren't all layups. I mean, he's as good as he's maybe their best 15-foot jump shooter right now.
Rob, I just think that when you look at the quality of depth of this team right now, I mean, I'm just looking at the South Carolina box score right now, but 19 minutes played from Adu, 19, of course, from Ziegler, 16 from Meshack, 17 from James, who's coming off the bench, 10 from Tobe Awaka. This team is deep, and the front line is much better and much deeper than I think any of us thought, coming into the season. And from what we've seen here to start conference play, that's a serious strength for Tennessee.
Yeah, totally. And I thought it was a serious question mark for me in the preseason. We talked about some of these things on the Rocky Top Rewind last night, but much, much better rebounding team than I thought they would be. In fact, they're the top rebounding team in the league right now, at a little over plus 10 per game. Nobody else is over plus 9. Tennessee's been better by a wide margin in that department. And it's in large part because of that front line you referenced, Eric. Nobody expected Tobe Awaka to be doing what he's doing. Jonas Adu, I mean, there was hope, certainly, that optimism that he could, take the step that he's apparently taken. But he's been a big piece of the puzzle with a couple of double-digit rebound games. But, man, Awaka he doesn't have huge numbers. We talked about this last night, fellas. He's 9th in the SEC in offensive rebounding, grabbing like a little less than 2.5 per game. He's averaging 8.4 minutes a night. That's astounding.
Hey, Rob, speak for yourself. I saw Brent Hubbs look at me during football season when Awaka would walk by us when we were waiting on media availabilities, and he said, and I quote, AP, I just see Dennis Rodman meets Charles Oakley meets Anthony Mason. And I said,
buddy.
Boom.
In the fall, I didn't recognize who Tobe Awaka was walking through the complex at that point in time, AP. What a story, though, Rob. I mean, and again, Tennessee found Zakai Ziegler late, and it worked out for him. Here's another guy that Ziegler knows that they go and get late. And, this guy's got a chance to be, for years for Rick Barnes in this program, a big time, I don't know if he's ever going to be a great scorer, but for what they ask him to do, the guy loves to rebound the basketball. What a great find in the summertime for Rick Barnes.
Fantastic. To me, whatever his potential is, Hubbard, I don't know if he's going to be a great scorer either, but whatever his potential is, he will get there because he is a conscientious, hardworking kid. Is fine with being coached hard like you get in this program. Super intelligent guy, understands the game, understands his role. That's one of the things I love the most about him is unlike just about any freshman you ever see, no matter how talented, he just doesn't try to do too much. He knows what his lane is and he stays in it. I'm out here to play defense and rebound. If I get an easy one, if I get a bunny, I'm going to take advantage of it, but I'm going to do my job and not get out of my lane. And I think that's one thing that coaches absolutely love about him because with so many freshmen, so often you just worry, they can say all the right things and they get out there in a pressure situation and just lose their minds. And Tobey's
look at a year ago. I mean, they like Jemiah Maychak from a defensive standpoint, Rob, but he might get the ball in the offensive end and it might be a walk or a charge. I mean, he was such a liability for them offensively that they if they were going to play him, it was, they were platooning, right? It was just situational basketball, offense for defense. But you're right with Tobey. I mean, if he knows he's not supposed to be shooting a shot and he's not going to be shooting something or trying to do something on the offensive end, then there's a trust factor for the coaching staff that his minutes could increase as the season goes along without the offensive or without enhanced expectations for him outside of what his role is right now, just because they trust him.
Yep. Totally agree. And to Eric's point, the depth is admirable. I don't think Rick's, in fact, I know Rick's not had a team with this much depth. I know Hubbard, me and you have both questioned whether he would, utilize it. Would he got to get out of his own, or what we perceive his own comfort zone to be, and playing, 7-8 guys, maybe with a ninth guy who's a utility or an emergency dude. But he looks committed to finding ways to get minutes for 10 guys every night.
Hey, Rob, quickly, what does Vanderbilt and Kentucky look like? A quick little scouting report for this week.
Vanderbilt looks to me, and again, maybe I'm oversimplifying, it looks to me a lot like they've looked, in the last few years. They won their first league game over South Carolina in overtime the other night. We all saw that same South Carolina team this past weekend that Tennessee handled with ease. Playing without Scottie Pippen Jr. this year, big hole. They have a tough time scoring the basketball. Their leading scorer is barely over 10 points a game. Vanderbilt has had a tendency to play Tennessee tough, even though Tennessee's won 10 in a row in this one. I don't think Vanderbilt can. They'll have a very, very hard time scoring on Tennessee tomorrow. I don't know. I might try to find some kind of a futures bet for you, Eric Kane, where Tennessee holds Vanderbilt under 50 points in this one. Would be the 10th opponent they've done so.
Ooh, that's a lot. Last order of business, Tennessee linebacker Juwan Mitchell is not going to be with the football team, enters the transfer portal yesterday.
Stunned.
Brent Hubbs, what does this mean for the linebacker room that's got a whole lot of youth? It's got Aaron Beasley coming back. You've added a linebacker from BYU and Keenan Peely, but you do not have Juwan Mitchell now.
Well, I mean, I think they added Peely because they knew they weren't going to have Juwan Mitchell, right, Austin?
Yeah.
There we go.
This is not a shock to anybody at Tennessee. By any means.
And it shouldn't be a shock to anyone who's listened to Volquest and their podcast, videos, read the message board. We've been talking about Juwan Mitchell being gone since December 15th, easily December 15th.
So for Tennessee now, just try to bring up those younger guys, and it's going to be a big spring, I feel like, for a lot of those guys. Like Elijah Herring, going to be a huge spring for him. For some of those guys who are just brand new, Aaron Carter and Jeremiah Teenlander, Jalen Smith, a big opportunity for those guys. But again, I feel like the bulk, you feel good about Beasley coming back. Peely, a guy that's played an awful lot. They're going to kind of shoulder that load there. And for Juwan Mitchell, he really only played in 8 games this year, missed a couple of games. Of course, had some type of suspension in the Orange Bowl. I think Brian John Maurice still likes his group and likes what they have behind Mitchell, and it made it easier to say goodbye.
Yeah, I mean, look, Juwan Mitchell did some good things. He had a hard time getting healthy. He had a hard time doing all the right things that the coaching staff wanted him to do. That's why you didn't see him in the Orange Bowl the way that you wanted. Aaron Beasley kind of took over that room. They like the youth behind him. That they want to bring a little experience beyond, and they went 1 for 1 here. And Mitchell's heading on elsewhere, looking for his third school to play for, and Tennessee feels like they've got a veteran in Peely who fits the culture in the room, who can help develop those 5 guys who are freshmen and sophomore in that linebacker room for Brian Jean-Marie to really build a nice core of linebackers for the next coming years for Tennessee, not just for 1 year. They could be in a situation where they're pretty solid at that position, Austin, for the next couple of years.
That's right. They like the 5 they brought in the last 2 years. They obviously feel like Beasley is someone who continues to get better and is really bought in under BJ, and they like what Peely brings from a veteran, big thumper linebacker. I will say this, you've got a few days left before you go into the kids can before the portal closes and you can't go in until spring. I still think there's a possibility that Tennessee sees some more movement, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
And I wouldn't, Hubbard, AP, wouldn't you guys say, and I'm not trying to cast huge aspersions on anybody, would you say the culture in that linebacker room has the potential to be a lot better this season than last?
I think there's a chance that there's a lot less drama in that room. And I think from that standpoint, yes, Rob, that takes out some of the mystery and some of the day-to-day unknowns, because I think you feel like that you got a group of guys in there who are who are all aligned for everything that you need to be. And I'm not ripping on Jeremy Banks left it all on the field for Tennessee when he played. There's not any question about that. It's just Austin, Sunday through Friday, it was always a bit of a wonder of what might be coming next. On Saturday was not an issue, but during the week there was concerns of what might be coming next. I think you had some of that with Juwan Mitchell as well.
Yeah, that's right. Again, we're not talking about like major things, but
not saying anybody's a terrible kid.
Yeah, a bunch of little things just add up, right? Like being late to things and all that stuff. It just adds up, and it's when you're late to 47 things, and coaches have to eventually hold you accountable, like that's on you, right? Like the coach can't. It's like if I let my 7-year-old get away with something that I don't let my 9-year-old get away with, then my 9-year-old's going to go, you know what? Probably not going to keep abiding by the rules. And so you have to eventually hold some people accountable, and that's what it boils down in my opinion.
So it's been a busy week for Tennessee, and hey, it's only Tuesday. Could get even busier with additions from the transfer portal, guys going into the transfer portal, team news, basketball, a whole lot more. And you guys can always stay up to date. The best in the business, Volquest.com. And, of course, Volquest on YouTube. Like this video. Let's get it to 500 likes. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We got plenty more to get into throughout the week, including the Mailbag podcast. That is coming up on Thursday. But for Austin Price, Rob Lewis, Brent Hubbs, I am Eric Kane. Appreciate you guys for hanging out with us here today. This has been the Volquest podcast here on a Tuesday.